Welcome. Today I'll be doing disaster management in the Philippines. First we'll start off with common disasters and a little bit about the geography. The Philippines is an archipelago of approximately 7,100 islands situated at the western rim of the Pacific Ocean. It is here at the western rim of the Pacific Ocean that runs the western segment of the Pacific Ring of Fire. The ring is the most seismically active part of the Earth, characterized by an ocean-encircling belt of active volcanoes and earthquake generators. The Philippine archipelago lies at the junction of two large converging tectonic plates. This tectonic setting makes the archipelago highly vulnerable to volcanic eruptions and devastating earthquakes. Earthquakes occur at a daily rate of 4 to 5 per day, though most are not actually felt. There are about 220 volcanoes, of which 22 are known to be currently active. The Philippines is also vulnerable to typhoons and the occurrence of tsunamis as a result of the earthquakes. Approximately 19 typhoons hit the country every year. Also, domestic terrorism is a large problem in the country, stemming from the political and religious differences between the North and the South. The North being the Catholic center of the Philippines, of Luzon, and the South being the Islamic capital of the Philippines in Mindanao. A little bit of history on the disaster management in the Philippines. Vulnerability of the Philippines to natural man-made hazards has been witnessed by Filipinos since historians can date back to 2000 BC. Early disaster preparedness capabilities can be found by archaeologists in the forms of dams and canals. Also, it has been inferred that early Filipinos had a very good disaster management early warning system. In 1954, the Civil Defense Act was issued and was meant to address the need for the protection and safeguarding of population. This act provided for the establishment of the National Civil Defense Administration, which was mandated to provide protection and welfare to civilian population during war and other national emergencies, and also to the National Civil Defense Council. This was meant to be implemented at a local level in the forms of provincial, city, and municipal civil defense councils. In 1972, the OCD, the Office of Civil Defense, was created, which assumed the functions of the NCD. The OCD was entrusted to ensure the protection of the public welfare during disasters or emergencies. It was also meant to coordinate on the national level the activities and functions of various agencies of the national government and private institutions. In 1978, the National Disaster Coordinating Council was implemented and was the highest policy-making body on matters of disasters in the country. 1988, the Calamities and Disaster Preparedness Plan was prepared by the OCD, and it was meant to save lives, prevent needless suffering, and to protect property and minimize damages during these calamities. In 2010, the Disaster Risk Management Act was implemented and was meant to teach children to become actively involved as being agents in saving themselves and others in case of disasters. They want to teach kids that because children's early response times, because the Philippines setting, traditionally parents and adults are often the hardest ones to convince to leave homes in the case of an actual disaster. The implementation pattern is basically a bottom-up, although sometimes it can be very confusing. First, we have the local level, the LCD. We have the PDCC, which is the Provisional Disaster Coordinating Council, the CDCC and the MDCC, which are the City and Municipal Coordinating Councils, and the BDCC, the Barangay Disaster Coordinating Council. Each one reports the other, starting from the BDC to the CD/MDCC to the PDCC. Their goals are to advise and carry out the plans of the regional level, the RDCC. The regional level is what we would consider the state level here in America. The Regional Disaster Coordinating Council coordinates at the regional level the activities of all government agencies assigned to a particular administrative region. It is very key to note that they actually have no budget of their own. And lastly, the national level, the NDCC member agencies are responsible for preparedness, mitigation, response, and recovery. The NDCC also does not have its own regular budget, but they do, at a national level, advise the President on efforts in disaster management. The OCD serves as its operating arm. A couple of the disaster management actors on a federal level are the OCD, NDCC, etc. Also, the military can be called upon by the federal government in the case of extreme emergency situations. There's really only one worthy private organization to note, which is the Philippine Red Cross, which has been extremely active and very crucial as part of disaster management since World War II. Some obstacles and shortcomings. First would be coordination. It seems there is no unity of command in some instances. There's a common question asked as who is actually in charge on the ground. There are similar concerns during emergency response, search, and rescue operations. Also, agencies are used to working on their own, so they do not know each other's capabilities. A clearly defined role of people would be very, very, very important here. Communication goes hand in hand with coordination. Without communication, coordination cannot be accomplished. Without coordination, communication cannot be accomplished. Next is funding. The Philippines lacks they're extremely hampered by funding, as a result by the national and regional levels not having their own funding available to them by the government. They require on outside funding organizations like Australia or privately funded organizations. Logistics and resources are concerned because communication and transportation are very lacking in necessary equipment and effective communication. An example is in a city like Manila, if there were to be a large disaster, there's a real concern that there may not be enough fuel to even fuel the ambulances needed to take people to the hospital. Significant disasters that have shaped Philippine disaster management policy. Historical vulnerabilities to natural disaster. Filipinos are no stranger to natural disasters. They've been experiencing them since they've arrived on the island, and they've become accustomed to dealing with them. This goes all the way back to when the Spanish colonized in the 1500s. The Filipinos were left to their own devices when disasters hit, unless they were a big deal, in which case there was a bottom-up implementation used, although a crude one at that. In 1969, the Casiguran earthquake dealt an extreme high amount of damage, as you can see by the picture on the right. The result of this was the creation of the NCDO. NCDO, as stated earlier, was created to ensure effective coordination of operations in different agencies during disasters caused by typhoon, floods, fires, earthquakes, and other similar calamities. In 1970, Typhoon Sening caused great damage on the eastern side of the Philippines. 2 years later, it effectively created the OCD, which is the operating arm of the emergency management in the Philippines, which is still used today. And it replaced the NCDA as the main operating arm. Here are my references.